Welcome to the Spoonful Show. I'm Rachel, and this is a space for real conversations about chronic illness, hope, and learning to keep going even on the hardest days. Because strength doesn't always look loud, sometimes it's simply taking life one spoon at a time. Welcome to this week's episode of the Spoonful Show. My name is Rachel, and I am so grateful that you're here with me. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Brendan McLaughlin, an integrative physician and the author of the Autoimmune Revival. In today's conversation, we're exploring a different way of understanding autoimmune disease, one that looks beyond managing symptoms and asks why the body may be struggling in the first place. We talk about why so many people feel stuck despite doing all the right things, the difference between rest and truly restorative healing, and how learning to listen to our body's signals can help us better understand what's really going on beneath the surface. If you've ever felt frustrated, exhausted, or like you're doing everything right and still not getting answers, I think you'll find this conversation both validating and thought-provoking. Let's get started. I want to welcome Dr. Brendan McLaughlin to the Spoonful Show. I'm so glad to have you here today.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rachel. It'll be fun. I'm looking forward to it.
I am too. I know that so many people listening are navigating chronic illness, autoimmune disease, and that feeling of trying everything they can just to feel a little bit better. Your work in your book, The Autoimmune Revival, Reawakening the Body's Rhythm, Resilience, and Immunity through the 4 Pillars of Autoimmune Health, approaches healing from a really interesting and hopeful perspective. And I'm excited to dive into that today.
Yeah, great. I'm excited to dive into it with you.
Yes. So to start, can you share a little bit about yourself and what led you to focus on autoimmune healing and root cause medicine?
Yeah, wonderful question. So, long story short, when I started off in medicine, it was mostly dealing with chronic pain. And I soon realized that a lot of people had chronic pain because of other health issues, right? So just doing surgery or manual treatments or acupuncture or these kind of things to help with pain was very, very temporary. And that didn't sit well with me. I wanted to kind of do better. And so I went back to school and did more school. And kind of kept learning and kept developing sort of my own system, one, to help people with pain, but then ultimately that sort of led into dealing with chronic illness at the same time, because if one wasn't addressed, then the other one wouldn't go away, right? And so that has led me on a journey of really diving deep and seeing what are the drivers of these things, and earnestly and honestly how I can help people. Because from a patient perspective, I know how frustrating it is. And I knew that because of family members. I knew that from just living with patients sort of over the years. But then I happened to marry a woman who had a lot of chronic disease for a really, really long time. She had 5 different autoimmune conditions. And so I had to kind of live with her through that as she came out the other side of it. And that gave me a lot of insight to the hardship sort of between the doctor visits, right? Because you go to your physician or your healthcare practitioner and, they give you some answers, they give you some interventions to do. You're sort of filled with hope and all of these things. But then what happens 5 days later when it's 2:00 in the morning and you have some kind of flare? Right? Like how do you deal with that in your mind? How do you have sort of the long-term picture and and maintain the belief that I'm going to get better while you're actively in pain or exhausted or have whatever the symptoms are of the condition that you have? And that was a very eye-opening experience for both of us, and just kind of living with her with that, and sort of doing my best not to just be a doctor all the time
Mhm.
and seek to fix something immediately, right? But earnestly and honestly sit with her and just be like, it's going to be okay. Like, we can come out the other side of this. And that gave me such a better perspective and a deeper sense of empathy for people.
Mhm.
Because, when people go, especially when you've been to multiple doctors, and I sort of half jokingly say to most folks, like, I'm not usually the first person people see, right? I think in our clinic, most people have been to 6 or 7 doctors before they come to see me.
Mm.
So there's a level of fatigue there. There's a level of trauma there. Most people my age grew up like, listen to the doctor. You have to do everything the doctor says. But as our environment has changed, as chronic disease has become more complicated, unfortunately, a lot of physicians don't have great answers. And it's in 2026, it's really, really, really hard, right? Like, in America, at least, our food on average isn't great. Our water isn't great. The air isn't great. So all of those things have to be corrected.
Mhm.
Um, and then we have kind of the drivers of disease, and there's lots of different things that drive disease. And so we have to be paying attention to all of those things. And most people kind of live on autopilot, right? We just when we're healthy, we take for granted. We're just like, hey, nothing's wrong, But I think most people that I see, when we really dig in, it's like there's been warning signs, right? Over the years, there's just been little things, and we kind of ignore those, ignore those, ignore those. So when we get to a point of like real symptoms that are interrupting our lives, the mountain that we have to climb to start resolving things seems incredibly overwhelming.
Yeah.
My
Yeah.
goodness, right?
Yeah.
And I'm very careful with people because my clinician brain wants to do all the blood tests, all the specialty tests, all of the things. And for some folks who are sort of savvy and ready for that, great. Some people aren't ready for that. And I had to learn that, because it was like, okay, let's just do all of the things right now.
Mhm.
Because just like clinically, that's just how I thought, right? But so much of this, especially when we first get the diagnosis or we first start feeling symptoms, it's scary.
Mhm.
It's like, what do you mean I have these things? And the fear gets compounded when physicians say, oh, there's nothing wrong with you, it's in your head. Or, oh, I don't know what's wrong with you, but we're going to trial a whole bunch of medications or supplements or whatever it is, and we'll kind of just play whack-a-mole and sort of try and figure it out.
Mhm.
Both of those things inevitably lead to a situation where we don't really trust outside sources, but then also we don't trust ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so much of healing is like recapturing your intuition, right?
A lot of us with chronic illness get stuck in feeling like the doctors are treating the symptoms and not finding the root cause. I'm
Mhm.
I'm in that situation right now, and it's frustrating because it's masking what is really going on.
Yes. Yeah. And I take the position that we are designed to be healthy. I think when we are born, we're supposed to be healthy. But a lot of things happen in our lives, unfortunately, sometimes starting at a very, very young age, that change our capacity to heal, that alter the trajectory of our health. And so when we take that position that we're designed to be healthy, then it's more about what do we need to remove, either from our life, from within us, right? Like if we have some kind of toxicity, but then also what thoughts, feelings, emotions are not serving us. And I think a lot of times that's the piece that gets missed a little bit.
Mhm.
And so it's all of those things, and that's complex, right? And the big thing I see too is, yes, just sort of putting fires out and dealing with symptoms. But then so many people come and see me and they've done great things. They've done work with really good physicians, but they've kind of done it in an order that their body wasn't ready for, right? So if I'm going to do a huge, big detox, but my body's not ready for it, well, then I'm going to have a flare 100% of the time. And then it's very hard to continue down that road if every time I try and do a detox, something else comes up or something else goes wrong. And that's just one example of many, many things that happen, right? So
Mhm.
unfortunately, we can kind of do the right thing at the wrong time. But yeah, it's really about being open to all of the things that can cause illness. That's a huge challenge, right? Especially with autoimmunity,
Mhm.
because so much of it is just, hey, we're going to suppress the immune system.
Yep.
We're going to give you these things to suppress the immune system. And we kind of need our immune system to function properly.
Mhm.
And it's reacting to something, right? And yes, there can be genetic components, but it's really sort of the epigenetics that flip the switch. And once we can get to understanding what those things are, and what's sort of making the immune system want to attack its own tissue, then we can make progress. But
Mhm.
simply giving immunosuppressive supplements or medications or other therapies isn't particularly helpful long term.
Mhm. Yeah. Why is it that people with autoimmune disease tend to collect them, have more than one autoimmune disease?
Yeah, that's a great question. And what happens is in autoimmunity, there is something driving changes, right? It could be an infection, could be a toxicity, can be other environmental things. Diet plays a role, all of these things. And inevitably, you see, even in research, you see like patients with Hashimoto's are more likely to get IBS than regular folks, right? Like people who don't have Hashimoto's. And so this is a very, very common thing. And what's going on is the immune dysregulation is never dealt with. Okay. So the thing driving the immune dysregulation is never dealt with. And in our body's attempt to heal, it's trying everything it can to try and heal. But eventually, we run out of the things needed that the immune system needs to actually run correctly. And new things start to, dare I say, break, but function in a way that's not optimal, right? And on some level, autoimmunity is life-saving, because when you look at how the immune system works, and when you look at how the different processes of the immune system work, when we stimulate the arm of the immune system that causes autoimmunity, it's actually preventative for cancer. And so the body's trying to heal but survive at the same time. So essentially, if our body's making a decision between, do I make more cancer cells or do I have another autoimmune condition, it's probably going to err on the side of autoimmune condition, right?
Mhm.
And until we understand what the driver of the immune dysregulation is and work to resolve that, then we just start collecting different conditions.
And what does that process look like of trying to find the reason for the autoimmune dysfunction?
Yep. So I think one of the big things is looking at, we know now just sort of with research, um, certain infections, certain toxicities will cause very specific autoimmune conditions, right? So we can rule that in or rule that out with testing.
Mm-hmm.
But then also importantly is the terrain of the body, right? So, and this is where we get into basic things like lymphatic drainage, like gut health, liver health, kidney health, all of those things. Because if my body can't drain and detoxify properly, especially in the gut, then I'm going to have a scenario where I start becoming reactive to everything, right? And so part of it is terrain, ensuring that all of those systems are working properly. Part of it is nervous system health, right? Because if I'm stuck in a state of fight or flight, essentially, which most people with chronic illness are, I would argue most people in 2026 are. And that's why everyone's stressed out and exhausted all the time.
Mm-hmm.
If we don't correct that at the same time, too, it's going to be very, very hard to detoxify, even if we identify the drivers properly, right? Which is why folks, some folks will say, oh, I have, this type of infection, or I have Lyme disease, or I have this toxicity, heavy metals, whatever it is. And then they get put on a very intense course of antimicrobials, antibiotics, chelation, all these things, and have awful, awful reactions. It's because their body's not prepared for it. So the solution is not do more of the thing that's causing things worse. It's improve the body's terrain and ability to let go of these things before we kind of do the more intense treatments.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned the fight or flight state.
Mhm.
So what
Yep.
actually happens in the body when you're stuck in that?
Yeah, I think the big thing is when we're talking about chronic illness, but specific to immune-related chronic illness like
Mm-hmm.
autoimmunity, is that we have to understand that our nervous system controls our immune system. Okay, so our autonomic nervous system, which is our sympathetic and our parasympathetic, that balance controls our immune system. And so when have prolonged stress, right? I think the important thing too is to delineate between something being stressful momentarily, right? Like I have to pick up something heavy and set it down, right? That's stressful, but it's for a moment in time,
Mm-hmm.
versus that prolonged, unabated stress, whether that's life stress, right? Family, marriages, school, work that just doesn't go away, or stress inside the body, right? Like I have something wrong and that's causing perpetuated stress inside the body. That's very, very different, right? We need some stress in our life, but on the counter, we have to be able to switch into kind of the rest and digest parasympathetic side. So when we're stuck in that perpetual cycle of stress, what happens is the autonomic nervous system drives the immune system to produce more cytokines.
Mm-hmm.
So we get the IL-6, the TNF alpha, all of these things start to increase. And when I'm producing more and more and more cytokines, my immune system starts to lose tolerance. And the T regulatory cells in the immune system start to be unable to see what's wrong, right? And so that persistent stress starts creating immune dysregulation. And at the same time, changes our hormone regulation. Okay. So usually the first thing to go is cortisol. So we get periods of really, really, really high cortisol. And then eventually we get cortisol produced at the wrong time or not at all. And I think one of the important things is cortisol is a good thing. We need it. That's what wakes us up in the morning. But cortisol is also anti-inflammatory. And so when I'm in a situation of prolonged stress, my immune system starts to get dysregulated and I'm not producing cortisol in an appropriate amount. I have a scenario now where I have a tremendous amount of inflammation that's uncontrolled and an immune system that doesn't know me versus not me. And that sets the stage for autoimmunity-like processes and ultimately autoimmune disease.
How would I describe my current state? Functioning-ish. And that's being pretty generous. Functioning-ish t-shirt available in my shop. Go to spoonfulofstrength.etsy.com or click the link in the show notes. Now back to the show.
Another thing that I hear all the time is I'm resting all the time. I don't feel restored. I get good sleep. But what's the difference between resting and truly like restorative healing, for sleeping?
Yeah. So a couple of things. Resting is not being on Instagram or watching Netflix.
Mhm.
A lot of people assume that because I'm quote unquote doing nothing, that equivalates to rest. However, if I'm scrolling through TikTok and Instagram and all of those things as I'm resting, that's not rest. We are stimulating different parts of our brain that is not going to allow actual parasympathetic rest. Okay. Same thing if we're watching shows on TV. Okay. Now, I'm not saying, sit in a dark room by yourself and don't do anything, but when we're consuming massive amounts of information, especially through electronic media, that's not restful per se. Okay.
Mhm.
And there are tons of conditions that lead to chronic fatigue, right? And so obviously those things have to be ruled out. But if we're just talking about what rest actually is, rest is resting your body, but it's also resting your mind too. And so getting out in nature is very restorative and restful, right? If that's
Mhm.
allowed. And some people, sometimes that's a little struggle with heat intolerance and different things like that. But first thing in the morning and in the evening, that's very, very restorative. And then simple things like painting, drawing, writing, reading a physical book. Those things are much more restful than electronics for many, many, many reasons. And I just encourage people to try to find activities and things like that that can be helpful and restorative in that regard, and limit the amount of electronics, because
Mhm.
the reality is, and even Stanford and MIT, and they've had a couple of studies come out in the last year and a half where just using our phones massive for 20 minutes a day massively spikes our anxiety,
Mm.
massively changes our brain neurochemistry, and a whole bunch of other things. So we think we're resting, but we're not getting the restoration that we need, right? Now,
Mhm.
I'm not saying don't use your phone and don't do all those things. There's a time and place for that, but it's different. We need to carve out some time where we're not being stimulated by external things,
Mhm.
and whether that's in nature or whether that's just doing simple activities at home is really up to the individual.
Yeah, that's great. You talk in your book about circadian rhythm and the
Mhm.
body's natural rhythms. Can you talk a little bit about that and maybe one or two small, like realistic things that people can do to support their healing without feeling overwhelmed?
Yeah. Yeah, the reality is, the circadian rhythm piece of things is one of the things that most physicians miss. And that's changing a lot now, which is really wonderful to see. But we are designed to be a part of nature. We are designed to be outside. And so part of the chronic disease epidemic is the fact that we've removed ourselves ostensibly from natural inputs, right? So just the normal 24-hour circadian cycle of a day, we've removed that. And so the reality is our nervous system, our immune system, and every single organ in our body relies on that 24-hour clock. And so we have to do things to anchor that clock. Okay. And so the 3 easy things to do are sunlight exposure, food timing, and exercise. Now, for a lot of chronic disease patients, exercise is kind of out of the equation a little bit, right? Outside of very, very light exercise on days that it's warranted. So we're kind of left with, especially at the starting point, light exposure and food. Okay. So easy, simple things. First thing in the morning, trying to get some sunlight, because unfortunately, most people, the first thing they look at in the morning is their phone, um, or it's the lights in the house, right? And instead of doing that, getting outside for 5 to 10 minutes, especially as the sun's coming up, or even when it's first up, kind of first hour or two, is a wonderful, wonderful way to start shifting and changing our nervous system, our immune system. And at the same time, at night, limiting our exposure to artificial light. Because when it's dark out, our body should be setting the stage for sleep. And that's really, really important, because sleep is when our immune system repairs, when our body repairs. And if I have the expectation where I'm just going to watch TV all night and then, crash at 11:30 or whatever and go to bed, a lot of people can fall asleep after that. Some people can't, but a lot of people can. But the quality of sleep, and hormonally and from a nervous system perspective, an immune system perspective, what happens during sleep when I do that is very, very different. So what I always tell folks is changing those habits is difficult, and that's long term. But in the interim, getting a simple pair of blue light blocking glasses to wear at night, just the red glasses. They're very, very available now. They're very, very cost effective. That can be a massive, huge thing for people. So sunlight in the morning, mitigating blue light at night can be very, very helpful for setting the stage for better healing, regardless of what kind of the causative thing is, or what the root cause is. But reconnecting as much as we can with nature and sort of the natural 24-hour cycle of things is a very, very important step for everybody.
Yeah. I think that one thing in reading your book, and one thing I connected with, is there's an idea that symptoms may not be our body betraying us, but our body trying to protect us. Can you explain that for us?
Yeah, I think for most of history, for most of medicine, um, symptoms were seen as a sign. My body is communicating something, right?
Mhm.
I am either missing something or I have an excess of something. And unfortunately, in the last 100 years, we've all sort of been conditioned that symptoms are just something to suppress. They are not a communication system for our body, right?
Mhm.
And so we get into this habit of just suppressing symptoms. I have pain, I'm going to take a painkiller. I have a headache, I'm going to take a different kind of NSAID. I have this, I'm going to take that. And unfortunately, this is most of medicine now, right?
Mhm.
Even when you look at a lot of more natural medicine, most of the supplements are just to hide symptoms, right? And I believe in the infinite wisdom of the body. I believe the body's always trying to communicate what's going on. And especially I always encourage people to do kind of their own health history audit, right? Like, separate from a practitioner, be like, hey, when did I really start not feeling great? And kind of going back through that timeline, not as a way of sort of lamenting about what's happened, but just getting an honest timeline of what's going on and saying, hey, I had this thing, or I had chronic sinus congestion for my whole childhood. right? Well, that's a big sign that something's been going on, right? And
Mhm.
that sinus congestion can then manifest into other things. And we can kind of build out a timeline, and that's one example, but we can build out a very strong timeline of what's going on. And I just really, really encourage people that symptoms are not the enemy at all. Symptoms are a sign that your body's trying to heal from something, and we just have to collectively, from a physician side, but then a patient side, get much better at decoding what those symptoms are.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, that just hasn't been rewarded in medicine. And like, even past generations, they kind of understood a little bit better than we do now of like how to actually work with the body rather than against the body. And that's really, really what it comes down to, right? We
Mhm.
ignore things, we ignore things, we ignore things, and then we try and force a change into a body that's been saying, hey, hello, something's wrong. And it might have been 5 years, might have been 10 years. Um, and unfortunately, a lot of people, mm, they've had things going on for a long time, but we're just all taught to ignore, ignore, ignore until it becomes too loud to ignore. And then climbing that hill becomes a really, really hard challenge sometimes.
Mhm. What do you think is a misconception about autoimmune healing that you wish more people understood?
Yeah. The biggest pushback I get, Rachel, is people say, well, it's genetic, there's nothing you can do. And unfortunately, people get very um, outspoken about it. And rightly so. I mean, that was sort of the main thinking for decades. And it was the main thinking for decades because we didn't have better answers.
Right.
The beautiful thing is now we do have better answers. But the unfortunate thing is it's taken a long time for physicians to catch up to the reality of what autoimmunity actually is. And I'm not saying that genetics doesn't play a role. That's not what I'm saying at all. But it's more about the epigenetic expression of what's going on. And the classic example of that, and I don't think this is your audience, but it proves a point. There's very, very specific genetics involved in rheumatoid arthritis. Okay. Um, but in not everyone who has those genetics gets rheumatoid arthritis. But almost 100% of people who are chronic smokers who have those genetics get rheumatoid arthritis. So I'm chronic smoker. I'm inhaling chemicals and tobacco, which is nightshade, which is inflammatory, and all these different things. And then all of a sudden there's an epigenetic switch and I develop this autoimmune process. But in the general population who has those genetic changes, it's only about 30% of people who end up developing rheumatoid arthritis. So genetics is important for sure, but it's just as much about the epigenetic expression and the environment that we're in, right?
Mhm.
Uh, and that's one of the things that's really, really challenging for people. But honestly, I think it's a beautiful thing because now we are equipped with the reality that, hey, there's something that we can do about this rather than being told, well, it's genetic, tough, just take these immunosuppressants, and that's what you're going to have to do for the rest of your life.
Mhm.
Now we can actually sort of shift and change the epigenetics to allow for symptom resolution, right? To allow for healing. And can we change the genetics? Well, a lot of people are trying, and there's a lot of beautiful advances in medicine, but we're not quite there yet, I don't think. But I've just seen profound um, changes in people's lives by addressing the underlying factors and sort of the things contributing to these epigenetic switches. We can create lasting change on the other side of that and have real, tangible improvement in quality of life. Because that's ultimately what it's about, right? Like if I had an autoimmune patient and they had, Hashimoto's or something like that, or IBS or rheumatoid arthritis or whatever, and we did a whole bunch of stuff and all of their labs look better, and they're like, oh, the labs are way better, but the quality of their life hasn't changed, I don't really think we've done anything meaningful per se,
Mhm.
right? But if we can do things to improve someone's quality of life and the relationships in their life, their occupation or their vocation or whatever, and just day-to-day living, then that's a beautiful thing, and that's ultimately what it's about. And
Mhm.
sometimes with chronic illness, we just get so far down the hole that we can't even envision that. Like, that's like a whole thing that doesn't even seem like great for other people, but that's never going to happen for me. And I just hope that people realize that there are answers, and things can be changed for the better, and life can be improved.
Mhm. I love that. Your book, The Autoimmune Revival, is available, and it's such a good read. And I think just talking with you today, it's been eye opening to kind of see a different approach and a different way of looking at things. And a lot of us with autoimmune conditions just feel like we're just chasing everything. And so I appreciate you bringing such good information. As a final note, what would you tell someone who right now is exhausted and discouraged and just stuck?
There is massive amounts of hope on the other side. And unfortunately, we can't rely on people outside of us to do the heavy lifting, because you can have the best physician in the world famous, whatever. You can have a good support system. But if you don't spend the time earnestly and honestly loving yourself, even when it's hard, even when you're exhausted, and spending the time to believe that there is a possibility of improving, then the road becomes very, very, very challenging. And uh, so many times the people who kind of overcome things are the ones that just have this unwavering faith and belief in themselves that it's going to be okay.
Mm.
And that helps mitigate the challenges. And the funny thing is, I've been saying that for years, and most people, when they hear that, it's like, I get it, but like, not helpful.
Mhm.
um, but the beautiful thing is, like, psychology and science is sort of catching up to this, and there's sustainable proof that what we believe about ourselves and our circumstances dramatically changes our circumstances for the better or for the worse. And the hardest thing anyone's going to have to do in chronic illness is begin to believe and love themselves. And the rest of it is ancillary, to be honest. Just because I've seen people who don't have that belief, who've been to the best practitioners in the world, done all of the right things, and they still feel very, very, very stuck.
Mhm.
And on the flip side, I've seen people who have that belief or have cultivated that belief over years, um, and they can weather the storm that comes with chronic illness much better. And so I think so much of it is that missing piece. And it doesn't have to be Herculean effort, right? You and I both know that a lot of times you don't have the energy or wherewithal for Herculean effort. but it's little things every day. And that's why one of the first chapters in my book is about mindset and just little simple exercises that you can do every day to remind yourself of what's important, of who you are, and where you want to go. And when you can do that little by little over time and chip away at all of the sort of not great beliefs that we have, chip away at what's actually important for us, and reinstill a belief in possibilities, then we start to shift and change things in a very positive direction. Like right down to our cellular physiology. Literally, every single cell in our body listens to everything we think and everything we say. And in an effort to heal, we should be very mindful of the things we say and the things we think.
Mm-hmm. That's beautiful. Where can our listeners find your book, find your website, and follow along with all this wonderfulness that you're doing?
Yeah, so books available on Amazon. That's the easiest way to get it. Just go on Amazon, Autoimmune Revival. It'll be right there. Website is aquarianhealthsolutions.com. And my excuse me, my blog, where I publish a lot of research articles, videos on autoimmunity, is over on Substack. So if you just type in my name on Substack, it'll come up. And I've got tons of articles, videos, Q&As, all sorts of things on autoimmunity and chronic illness over on Substack there.
Mm-hmm. We will link all of that to the show notes so that people can find you and follow you. And we'll have a link to the book as well. So thank you so much for coming and taking time out of your day to talk
Yeah.
with me. And I love the information that you brought in and some good tips for people who don't know where to start. And I just appreciate it so much.
Yeah, you're very welcome, Rachel. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, awesome. I want to thank Dr. Brennan McLaughlin for joining me today. I really appreciated this conversation, especially the reminder that our symptoms may not be our body betraying us, but our body trying to tell us that something deeper may be going on. I think that perspective can feel really powerful for people who've spent so long feeling dismissed, frustrated, or disconnected from their bodies while searching for answers. And honestly, the part of the conversation that stayed with me the most was what Dr. McLaughlin said about belief, that sometimes one of the hardest parts of chronic illness is continuing to believe in yourself when your body feels unpredictable and the road feels exhausting. I know so many people are carrying that weight around, and I hope that today's episode reminded you that there's still hope, even in the middle of feeling stuck. Sometimes healing starts with the smallest things. Giving yourself compassion, listening to your body, and believing that improvement is still possible. If you'd like to learn more about Dr. McLaughlin, check out his book, The Autoimmune Revival. I'll have all the information linked in the show notes. Again, thank you for saving some spoons to be with me today. Until next time, take care. Just a quick reminder, everything shared here is based on personal experiences. Please consult your doctor for your own care.